Want to thank everyone for joining us on the City Hall check-in series, and wanted to let everyone know this is a series that's going to continue to go on. We invite department directors, folks from City Hall, the mayor's office, and today we're really honored to have OEWD and the planning department join us to talk about the Small Business Recovery Act, which is an add-on, a build-on to the Proposition H that many of us worked so hard on, and including the mayor's great support and leadership on that. Before we kick things off, I want to just make mention of our title sponsor, Waymo. And if you haven't had a chance to take a test drive in a Waymo autonomous car, it is amazing. It doesn't really matter where you stand on the subject, just the technology that they have been able to accomplish is fantastic. So if you can, check out this little video and learn more about Waymo.
Say hello to Waymo, the world's most experienced driver. The Waymo driver is what we call our self-driving technology. It has over a decade of real-world experience and has driven millions of miles. With Waymo One, we can make it safer and easier for you to get around, so you can spend more time doing what you love. And with Waymo Via, the same driver with the same deep experience can also deliver your packages or save you a trip to the dry cleaners. Or if you run a business, Waymo Via can help you transport whatever you need, making sure shipments arrive right when they're supposed to. This is the Waymo driver, a driver that's reimagining transportation for all of us.
Okay, great. And thank you, Waymo, for that and their continued support of the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to first start off by introducing Laurel. And Laurel has been a huge supporter of the Chamber of Commerce. Laurel is the Director of Business Development for the City and County of San Francisco in the San Francisco's Economic and Workforce Development Office. She has a role overseeing all business attraction and retention activities for the city. And Laurel has worked with the City and County of San Francisco for 16 years. A little bit of fun fact, Laurel, before joining the business development team, worked with Mayor Newsom's in the film and television office, working to attract and facilitate films and projects, including The Pursuit of Happiness, Milk, Hemingway, and Gellhorn. So that's a little bit of a fun fact, and maybe she got an autograph or two in that process. Also introducing Sheila. Sheila comes to us from the planning department, and she runs a citywide retail study coordinating department's response to state legislation and supporting other projects aligned with San Francisco's priorities for housing, transportation, and other public benefits. Prior to the planning department, Sheila has worked on policy projects to help stabilize vulnerable communities in the Mission District, streamlining the permitting of childcare facilities in San Francisco. So I want to first start off by passing it off to Laurel. And if you have any questions, the chamber staff is here. We're going to use the chat room for questions and answers and really have an open dialogue. And Laurel, could you please take us through so much work that you and the mayor have been working on this Small Business Recovery Act?
Yeah, thank you, Rodney, and thanks everyone for having Sheila and I today. This was sort of born out of both the Proposition H and the Mayor's Save Our Small Businesses initiative, but also Sheila and I were both working on the Economic Recovery Task Force. So we took the opportunity from the feedback we heard in there to also build into this proposed legislation. The Mayor challenged us to go back to the drawing board. I don't have screen share, so if you guys want me to share some slides, if you guys could enable that for me. Otherwise, I can just talk you guys through this. So she challenged us to go back to the drawing board after Proposition H and go deeper and go bigger. And so that's what Sheila and I did. She asked us to explore ways that we could further cut bureaucracy by building on the previous success that we had identified in Proposition H, to enhance flexibility for small businesses, because we know that this is a challenging time and things are changing. And here we go. You should see my screen now. And to also adapt to provide protections and opportunities for entertainment and cultural establishments, because we know that these groups have been were shut early in the pandemic and will likely open very late, and are also vital to bringing people back out of our houses and being excited to get back into our communities and neighborhoods. So the first thing we did was look at cutting bureaucracy. Proposition H guaranteed that permits for our NCs, our neighborhood commercial districts, would be processed in 30 days by the city. That means that we have created a system where the Department of Building Inspection, Fire, Planning, Health, all of them get together and simultaneously review to make sure that people can get their permits quickly. But that was only for our NCs, and we've seen impacts that across our city, Union Square, Soma, Tenderloin, all of those neighborhoods downtown are facing lots of vacancies. And it's really important that once we have a tenant that we're able to get them open quickly. So she is, through this legislation, proposing that we make that a citywide allowance. She's also, to do this, removing the notifications in our mixed use zoning districts like Soma and Tenderloin. This was something that the voters did for our neighborhood commercial districts. It's removing the notification if you are a principally permitted use. So if you are changing a hair salon into an ice cream shop in Soma, we don't want you to wait 30 days to send a letter to all of the neighbors to make sure that they know you're doing this. We want you to just do the change of use, get your permits, and start getting open. Additionally, there are still some uses that neighborhoods and communities and the mayor feel like deserve a little extra look. But we also believe that we need to provide some certainty to those businesses and to those property owners and to those communities to get those spaces tenanted. So for this, she is proposing to expand the expedited conditional use process. She is adding to this bars, nighttime entertainment, medical cannabis dispensary, non-retail sales and service, and a new category that she's creating called small formula retail. What this would do is say that where this is a conditional use, we would continue to have a conditional use, community would continue to have the ability to opine, planning would look at it, the commission, and think about conditions they may or may not want to add to the operations. But we would guarantee that all of this would happen in 90 days. You would get to commission and get your answer. For her definition of small formula retail is 11 to 20. So where formula retail is allowed with a conditional use, a small formula retailer with 11 to 20 establishments worldwide would have access to this fast lane for conditional use. Larger formula retail would continue to remain in the regular lane, but these smaller formula retailers would have access to this fast lane under this proposal. She is also proposing that we remove the abandonment clause for all uses except for formula retail. So this is the idea that if I am a movie theater in West Portal and I am vacant for 3 years, I would lose my conditional use. So we have a currently vacant movie theater there. I hope that it is not vacant for 3 years. I hope we tenant it up really quick. But if it is vacant for 3 years, if at 3.5 years we find someone ready to open the movie theater, currently we would say now you've got to go back to the community and get a conditional use and add that process in. Let's not do that. Let's just get them back in there. Let's get this longstanding vacancy filled. This would also principally permit the use of rooftops. So Proposition H allowed rear yards to have activities from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. with certain operating conditions, like no stand-up bars. If you have a bar, it's table service only. We want to propose that we also do this for rooftops. There is a lot of excitement about being outdoors. It feels healthier. We're all really encouraged by spending time outdoors right now. So for the limited buildings for which they have a rooftop that would be accessible and they can make those investments, we want to make that principally permitted. If they want to operate outside of those hours or with different uses, such as a stand-up bar, they would have to go through the traditional process of conditional use. We want to remove density calculations for restaurants. This is a process where we make a small business owner go and count the linear footage of the other uses that are similar for 300 feet. It's hard. It often takes multiple tries. It adds a lot of time. And it's a fact that is not particularly considered at commission. And so we feel that this is just an extra step that we can remove out of the process. And then we want to remove some definitions. And by doing this, it would make it so that a small business owner that is opening doesn't have to go to planning as often to get a change of use. The definitions we're proposing to remove are catboarding and trade shop. These two definitions we would put into general retail. So the idea would be if I went from a bookstore to a cobbler, I would not have to go get a change of use now. I could just do that. Similarly, we want to remove instructional services and gyms and put those into personal services. So if I wanted to go from a massage establishment to a karate studio, I would not have to go to the planning department and ask for and tell them that I was doing this. As a whole, this does not change permissibility very much for any of these uses. It does tend to make trade shops more permissive on the second and third floors in a lot of our districts. But other than that, most of these uses have a similar usage restrictions and allowances as they did before. To expand flexibility, this is an idea that came directly from the Economic Recovery Task Force, a desire to allow for accessory dwelling units to be built on the ground floor of commercial spaces in the rear. So this is the idea. You might have a really large ground floor that's long, 4 spaces that could also facilitate an ADU. As long as you maintain 25 feet of depth of retail, you could put an ADU in the back. This could be a really exciting opportunity for a small business owner to, have an apartment in the back. I can imagine if I was owning a bookstore, have my kids in the back in my apartment and operating the bookstore out of the front. It's a really interesting idea. There's some places that this might be possible, and there's a lot of places where it wouldn't, but it's an interesting opportunity that we want to give those unique spaces that are really deep and hard to tenant, an opportunity to think about adding an ADU there. We're also currently, we allow limited restaurants to host a caterer in the back in their kitchen. So the idea is if I'm a dinner only restaurant in West Portal and Sheila wants to start a granola making company, she could use my kitchen to make granola in the morning while we're closed. And then I could come in and operate the restaurant at night. It would help me pay rent. It would help Sheila get her small business off the ground. It's kind of a win-win for everyone. But our current law says that if I have wine on my shelves at my restaurant, Sheila can't do that because I'm now a full service restaurant. We don't think that should matter. It's been working really well for limited restaurants, and we want to expand this opportunity to all restaurants throughout the city. And then finally, the challenge from the mayor to support and protect arts and culture. So the first thing is that we require a limited live performance permit when you add any sort of performance into your establishment. So this is the idea, again, my dinner restaurant, I want to add a guitarist on Saturday nights to create some ambiance for my customers. Currently, I'm required to get a permit from the city. We want to say that if it's a single solo unamplified performer that ends by 10, that you no longer need to come to the city for a permit. If I wanted to add a jazz trio, that might be a little louder. So we do think that you should still have to get a permit, but we want to allow you to get that permit till 11 p.m. now. As a whole, what we do is we ask you to come in and you get a permit till 10 p.m. And then after a year of operating, we let you come back to the Entertainment Commission to ask for that extra hour. We haven't seen a lot of problems with that extra hour. We'd like to remove that extra step and just let you go for whatever time the commission conditions you to, but give them the opportunity to consider that time being 11 p.m. We want to remove the limit on one-time event permits. So this is the idea. We currently limit that to 12. The idea here would be to expand that and allow you to have as many a year as you want. After 12, the commission or Entertainment Commission staff would review the permit and make sure that you are not avoiding getting a place of entertainment permit. But a group like the Union Square CBD, when they used to do Winter Walk, they were only allowed to program that space with live entertainment 12 days or 12 spaces a year. And we want to allow them, if they want to do 30 days of activations there and the whole neighborhood signed on, they can't get a place of entertainment permit. They don't have site control. Let's allow them to do a bunch of activations. Another good example is the Sunset Farmers Market. If they want to have a little entertainment every other Saturday at their farmers market, they should be allowed to do so. We shouldn't be conditioning them to only 12 a year. But again, if you're Laurel is having a rock band in her restaurant every Saturday night, after 12, the commission's going to say to me, Laurel, it sounds like you need a place of entertainment permit. You can't keep getting these one-time entertainment permits. So we still have those controls for those that are trying to avoid getting the actual permit. We are also going to proposing to add a conditional use for the removal of nighttime entertainment uses. And we're going to have this expire in 3 years. We think we're in a unique moment right now. Again, nighttime entertainment was one of the first things we shut down. It will likely be one of the last things that we reopen. And we want, if a building owner or a business wants to remove that nighttime entertainment use, we want them to take a pause and to talk to the community about it. We want to just make sure that everyone's being thoughtful. These are unique spaces that drive our neighborhoods, that bring culture, bring tourists, and once lost, they're very hard to bring back. So for this unique moment, we want to have this discussion if anyone is removing them. And then the last thing is that we have entertainment uses that are long standing throughout the city, and some of which never got the proper land use authority. For whatever reason, maybe a piece of paper was forgotten to be filed, maybe the records got lost, maybe they were created before this land use authority was needed. But we have found that it makes it hard for a business to change hands or to continue operating or expand ownership when this is not on the land. A really good example is Beach Blanket Babylon never got land use authority for nighttime entertainment. It's very clear that that's a theater. It's long standing. They actually were probably in existence before we even had this land use authority. But the next operator was coming in and was a little bit worried about taking over the space because of the fact that they might have to go through a conditional use process. And so hiring lawyers and all of that. What we would like to propose is that if a business has been longstanding and operating with at least 10 years of permits from the Entertainment Commission to show that they've been operating with all the city permits they thought they needed, that community knew that they were operating as an entertainment venue, then we would allow the zoning administrator to conditionally add this, or to administratively add this land use to their property. This would still be appealable to the Board of Appeals, but it would provide some certainty to a business owner that was taking over the space and trying to preserve the use, that they wouldn't have to go through a conditional use process, and it would get them to just more clarity. So that is everything that is in the mayor's proposal. And I'd like to see if anyone has any questions. And Sheila's here because I'm talking all this stuff about planning, but she's the planning expert. So she's here to back me up for any questions we have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Laurel. That is such a comprehensive piece of legislation, and I know we're very excited about it. I know I posted in the chat, but if anyone does have questions, please feel free to just drop them in the chat, or there's a little Q&A box at the bottom of your screen that you can type those in. Until some questions come in, I guess, Sheila, was there anything you'd like to add to that presentation at all?
No, Laurel, that was an impressive summary of some pretty complicated pieces of code delivered in a very clear way. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I guess some questions that we've received about this legislation. I know there is a section about pop-ups. Would you mind talking a little bit to the different pop-up changes that are allowed in legislation? Or was that?
The last Proposition H had some pop-up stuff that it allowed. And so this legislation is, we are in the process of bringing that to fruition. And I hope to have some announcements about the various permits that have been created to facilitate that. The pop-ups here, maybe you're talking about the one-time event permits.
That might have been what they were asking.
Yeah. And so that is, for those by having more than 12, let's say I am a bookstore and I want to have jazz a couple nights. Yeah, it would give me the opportunity to explore a few other things throughout the year, potentially.
That's great. And then what does support look like for this legislation? Is this being embraced by the community?
Yeah, I'm here today to ask for your support. So I'm hoping you guys would be willing to review this and take a formal position. And I'm hoping that formal position would be a support position. I think as a whole, a lot of people are actually quite open to this. I think there is a real understanding of the number of barriers that businesses face here in the city, and an urgency by many of us about the number of vacancies and wanting to get them filled as fast as possible. I do think there are some communities, we've really tried not to change permissions for most of the uses. We've tried to leave community, their zoning tables alone. There are little pieces of bureaucracy that some communities have intentionally placed in the code. And so they're trying to make sure that they feel comfortable with those leaving. And we're working with them to talk about how they've used that, and if that is still, providing them with the outcomes that they need in this moment. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get to a place where we can all be relatively in agreement there.
Definitely. And for our listeners, if anyone's on our public policy committee, we will be having a formal vote tomorrow on this item. Let's see, we do have a Q&A question. Does removing the requirement to measure front footage also remove the concept of concentration of uses? For example, there will no longer be the need to avoid concentration of use.
Okay, so some neighborhoods have special use districts that cap, like, for instance, the number of restaurants. We are not changing that. What we are changing is the calculation that has to go into this planning commission report that goes to the commission. We're removing the need for that. What I have experienced personally in just watching different businesses go through this is I've seen a lot of testimony that says, I feel like there's too many bookstores on the street. It's not bookstores because we don't count that, but I feel like there's too many bookstores and I don't want another bookstore because it just feels like there's too many. I've rarely seen someone go back and say, it says that there's 26% of the linear frontage is bookstores, and I feel like the healthy percentage is 24%, so I don't think we should allow them. It's the linear frontage is sort of a planning concept that existed, that was brought about in the 80s and has sort of fallen away. The percentage that's appropriate for a commercial, in West Portal might be different than for the Mission. And so it's much more about the feeling of the community, the feeling of the streetscape than the actual calculation. And that is what we're trying to reflect in here. Or at least that's our belief. And communities may feel different. And I understand that if they do.
Definitely. Let's see, I do have one other more open-ended question. Will there be any definitions of businesses that will be removed in the planning code to enact this legislation?
Yeah, Sheila, you want to explain the cat boarding and trade shops?
So there's 4 unique definitions that we're proposing to remove. So right now we have 32 unique definitions for retail uses in San Francisco. And the 4 that have been identified are cat boarding, which will become part of kennels. And the other one is trade shop, which will move up and become part of general retail sales and service. So there's still a line within general retail sales and service that will describe what a trade shop is. But what it does is allows a trade shop to perhaps do other things that are within that general retail sales and service category, or for a space, if a trade shop were to close, they wouldn't have to do a change of use to then become a bookstore afterwards. So it just, by getting rid of those unique definitions, it gives businesses and spaces more flexibility. The other 2 that were the unique definitions that we're getting rid of and merging in, sort of leveling them up into other definitions, are instructional services, which are things like dance studios, music studios, karate schools, Pilates. It's somewhere where you'd go in and actually take a lesson from somebody. And that will move up into personal services, and gyms as well will move up into personal services.
That's great. Thank you, Sheila. Let's see. I think right now I will pass it over to Rodney. I know we have some more questions from the chamber side.
Great. If we can just kind of have a dialogue. I am incredibly excited by so many of these things. And for anyone who's watching this and feels maybe a little bit confused, the planning code is incredibly confusing and dense, and has duplicative things, which I think that you've addressed in some cases here, given the times that we're in. San Francisco, part of its recovery is going to be based on land use and how we redefine it. And I think you've done a fantastic job here of identifying some things that maybe we wanted to do for a long time that COVID sort of triggered. Things I've made just a couple of points here. If I can just restate them, and maybe you have an opportunity to reinforce them. In the end, I hope the Chamber and the Public Policy Committee will support this, but I hope our hundreds of members, business members, large and small, understand that this energy back to the small businesses and helping folks reopen and maybe open business for the first time has San Francisco with a clear opportunity, especially where commercial rents are, for a small business renaissance. And if we can clear the lanes and make people make it easy for them, I think that is possible. Something I've always wanted to see is more rooftops. They don't have to be bars, they don't have to be noisy bars, but more rooftop seating, more rooftop reading. Laurel, maybe your dream bookstore has a rooftop lounge that you can actually pick up a book and bring a magazine upstairs. And so I think in San Francisco, a lot of us make the connection that it's going to be a bar, it's going to be a noisy spot. That doesn't have to be the case. As you travel, I'm sure, all around the world, you see that people take advantage of their rooftops, take advantage of the southern exposure. In San Francisco, I think, has great opportunity there. So applaud that. Question about that though, is if memory served me correct that rooftop access is allowed to 25% of the footprint, and would that remain the same? You remember that, Sheila, by chance? Sorry, a very specific question.
That is a very specific question, and I would need to, those kind of specific questions, I would want to actually go back into the code and check.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I ask it because I want the public and people to understand it's not going to be 100% of the footprint of every roof deck in San Francisco. These are small percentages. So
I can check on that and let you know. I mean, any of the rooftops do have to meet health and safety requirements, which does, limit what can be done there. So fire would still need to have all of the approvals in place so that there's safety, safe egresses. So that, I mean, as Laurel said, it's a great opportunity where it does work, but we recognize that it's not going to be viable everywhere.
Yep. The loss or requirement of conditional use for abandoned properties, your theater example, I think is a great one. Hopefully people find the energy to pick back up where maybe there's been a pause on a type of business. There's sort of an old rule of thumb that if something worked, that type of business worked years ago, that is a lucky restaurant spot, that's a lucky bookstore spot. And so hopefully in this small business renaissance, people recognize that. I just wanted to also mention, you can tell I'm excited by this, but that has to do with me spending so much time at the Planning Commission. Excited about what seems like a simple thing of allowing full service restaurants to do catering. I mean, this is something we have so much space. We fight for space in San Francisco, but yet we have so much space, and it blows my mind when you look at the downtown or any area really at nighttime and you see how much space there is and how few lights are on and how we're clamoring for this space from 9 to 5. And yet there's a swing shift that would love to be in there. There's a nonprofit that would love to work from 4 to 8 p.m. There's a school that would love to be there from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. and get out of someone's way. And so this double use of space, double sharing of space, I think is fantastic. I think it's going to give some bakers some unique opportunities to get into restaurant spaces where that kitchen is literally cold. And from an energy perspective, it takes a lot. If any of you worked in a commercial kitchen, it takes a lot of energy to literally warm up a kitchen or to cool down a walk-in. And so having that sort of use 24/7 as best we can, I think is just great for our city, great for our environment, great for people who want to have a little side hustle and start up of a bakery business, whatever it might be. So I just didn't really have any questions, but wanted to applaud these things. And Laurel, Sheila, if you had any questions that you wanted to pile on to that, please do.
No, thanks, Rodney. And I think that's, the restaurant one I'm excited about. We have some actual entrepreneurs that, lost their jobs during this time and started new businesses and made the mistake of starting them in a kitchen of a restaurant that serves, cocktails. And it made us realize that was maybe not a useful distinguishing characteristic for what spaces could be shared. So I'm excited for that one and to help those entrepreneurs be able to keep baking their wedding cakes.
Definitely. I think you can tell the chamber is very excited about this. I know we're always excited about, entrepreneurship, innovation. And I have a question myself, and then we do have another question from Cliff Waldeck, but I was just wondering, as we look towards economic recovery, I would imagine this is something that could really help those entrepreneurs who, might have lost their jobs, or maybe they want to try something else. Just in your perspective, how do you think this legislation will help our economic recovery as we look towards reopening?
I really think that all of these changes, I feel like would make it less scary to open a small business in San Francisco. I think knowing that you'd have your permits from us in 30 days, knowing that you'd be at commission and get an answer on the conditional use in 90 days, that certainty is like the least that we can give our business owners who are investing all of this money to start a space here in San Francisco. And I think that's what this legislation really tries to do. It doesn't give you a yes at planning. If you have a conditional use, it doesn't say the commission's going to say yes to your bar, but it says that you're going to know in 90 days if they're saying yes. And I think I think that's something our businesses should be demanding of us as a city. And I'm hopeful that the board will agree and that we'll provide this certainty to business owners. And I think it will help reduce the amount of capital it takes to start a business and mean that an entrepreneur that may not be as well financed can get open and can take a chance on San Francisco and can bring their vision to our corridors, to our downtown, to SoMa.
Yeah, I know there's so much uncertainty in opening a small business, so any amount of certainty, I'm sure, is very appreciated. And speaking of capital, we do have a question from Clifford. Any sense of if the Board of Supervisors initiatives that could result in the reduction of the cost of employees for employers?
This is a space that the board's talking a lot about. We've always been a city that takes care of our employees. And I think that is something that we are proud of. And I think that's why we have so many great people that live here, come to live and work in San Francisco. But I know that it is a burden on many of our small businesses. It is something that the Economic Recovery Task Force asked us to look at. I know that there are people thinking about it. But I don't know of any actual legislation that's about to be introduced. So I don't have any further insight on that.
Thank you, Laurel. One last call for any audience questions before we wrap it up today. Again, you can post those in the chat or in the Q&A box. But I think we can go ahead and Rodney, if you'd like to close us out. Oh, I think classic Zoom line, you are on mute.
Yeah. Just want to thank Laurel and Sheila in the mayor's office and the mayor herself for really pushing this forward. We're going to try to help push this, get the word out. I know it's complicated, and even Laurel, your really good overview is still very complicated for the average person. So we will do our best to help you disseminate that and get the word out. And please, everyone out there, please support this Recovery Act. So thank you very much for attending, and stay tuned for other City Hall check-in series episodes coming up. Hey, well, we're still here. I'll make some mentions on the last slide here. We have some pretty cool things. The next state check-in will be with Treasurer Fiona Ma on April 21st, and we have an executive coffee break on April 29th. May 3rd through 7th is Small Business Week. Small Business Week is a national program. San Francisco is doing a ton of work in programming and building content. You can find out more on sfchamber.com. It's kind of like the Mardi Gras, where it's a big party, but everyone gets to put their own spin on small business as they choose. An executive coffee break on June 3rd. As you can tell, we're not stopping here. June 24th, we got the City Beat Breakfast, our big, what was a 700 person in one room breakfast. We're going to be online this year, hopefully back in person next year, but it should be exciting. And then a small business member mixer on July 27th. Thank you again to BlackRock, Safeway, Kaiser Permanente, Delta Dental, and Waymo as our title sponsor. And Laurel and Sheila, thanks very much again.
Thank you all for joining us.